Hello, and welcome to episode 29 of the Cutie Art Crusaders for January 15th, 2013. I'm going to be honest, I've completely forgotten the order in which I said the intro, so I just went with it.
Just wing it.
Welcome to the show.
Just wing it this time. We're good at this.
See, this is the problem, though. Okay, before we go too far.
Yeah.
My name is Raymond Plaza. I'm the organizer and editor of the podcast, and today I'm joined by...
Burn to one. I'm the special guest coordinator guy, and I don't know why you gotta be the editor. I edited 2 in junk last 3 weeks and 4 a.m. in the morning.
No, okay, I have a story about that
Man.
when we finish. Go ahead, Flutter Guy.
And I'm FlutterGuy317. I'm the art coordinator on the show.
Yeah.
We're missing Pinky Dash today. He mentioned that last week. He's off doing something in Australia.
He's doing Australian things like boxing kangaroos or something.
Getting licked by
Boxing
cows, the
kangaroos.
huge.
Saving his baby from the dingo.
Whoa, now.
Dingo ate my baby.
I didn't know
never heard that?
I didn't know Pinky Dash had a baby.
Oh, okay.
Saving his roommate's kids over that.
Okay, so you were just talking about the fact that, why are you the editor? I'll tell you why. Because last week in the live stream chat, somebody said, oh, Burn, like, I was like, I hate it when Burn edits because he always puts himself in. Like, he always inserts those little things in. And then the person was like, what do you mean when he edits? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I thought he edited all the time. I was like, what? I did like the first 9 episodes, and we've been alternating ever since. I even told her. I said, like, listen to the intro. I say I'm the organizer and the editor.
Well, how come you can't be the host and I'm the special guest coordinator guy, and then we're all edit?
Well, no, because we don't all edit. That's the
I
point.
haven't edited yet.
So then, do I get to
Look,
say
if
that I'm
you
the editor too?
Yeah, of course
Yeah.
you can. You're the special guest
okay.
coordinator and the editor.
I just want to feel special, man.
No, I agree. We're spending 5 to 6 hours a week editing this podcast, so you know.
Right?
That was a pregnant pause.
Speaking of, yeah.
So, anyways, last week was our fan art, or part 2 of fan art episode, which people seem to love for some reason, even though it was just pictures of us, which is
Yeah.
weird. But people still really seem to love it. I think
Because the artists were so awesome.
Well, it's true. The artists were pretty fantastic, and we really appreciate it. I think there's one thing, though, that we did not wrong, but I think was kind of like a bad side effect of... It was just something... Okay, let me explain it, because I'm not making any sense. So last week and the week before, we were not necessarily prepping anything. We had just like these relaxed, casual blah episodes where we talked about people who send us in art, right? I'm not saying blah isn't bad. I mean, blah is in no effort and like no real cohesive
Not on our
order
part,
or
but
anything.
you know, the artists were
Planning
amazing.
and strategically
Right.
placing
There's like
out
a different
tangible thought.
different mindset, and I think
Yeah.
that was beneficial for Pinky Dash and you, Flutter Guy, because you guys talked a lot more than you usually do. But I think it was not beneficial for Burned and I, because Burned and I are of the individuals. We're of the type of person where we have to think about what we're gonna say.
Or else end up sounding like full
Because
ridiculous.
What happens with you guys is if you think about stuff that you're going to say, like you're just going to stay silent because you'll just go, oh, I never have anything that I need to say, or like it's not properly formulated yet. Bird and I will talk regardless of whether or not it's something smart to say.
Or relevant.
Right. So we'll just, if we don't have anything particularly smart to say, we'll fill it in with stupid things because that's just how we naturally happen. So those like relaxed episodes just turned out for both of us to just be like, bleh.
Yeah, what you guys didn't get the pleasure of hearing is that little cut in I did make, like where I actually edited myself in. Like my sentence there, actually trying to defend myself, was just like, but the thing you see, the painting and
the pudding pops and the, yeah.
it didn't make any sense at all. And I remember listening to it and editing and cringing like,
So I think there's something good that you and Pinky Dash can learn from, you know, getting a little bit more relaxed and just, you know, coming up with the conversation pieces and popping your opinion out there, not being worried about cutting us off because we talk too much anyways. But there's something we can learn about the fact that damn, we need structure. I re-listened to those and I was like, what am I saying?
There's lots of structure to this episode.
Yes. Okay. So this episode is ridiculously structured, in fact. And
Yes.
So this episode, I'm just going to I'm going to introduce it because I have a question for Burned, which can transition into Burned explaining what the heck it is. So this week's episode, as we joked about and then randomly decided to have last week, this episode's about value.
Yes.
So value is something that Burned has been bringing up a lot over the last, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks. Now, the way that he brought it up, I thought, kind of made it weird because you just kind of mentioned value and then we're all just sitting here being like, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so I started pulling jokes about the fact that you would always say value. I'd like to point out there's other things that I joke there's other things that I like poke you about, Burned, like rambling and the cage and cutting your hair or whatever. But I don't think those are just ridiculous over the top things. When I make fun of you of value, I don't think people are looking at those the same thing. It's like, oh, it's ridiculous. Like we've had people start making memes out of this.
Yeah, right. You know who you are. It's not funny.
And I was kind of putting, like when I saw them, I was kind of putting my finger up. I was like, okay, wait, hold on a second. Because this is the one thing that I make fun of Burned on, where I think he actually has a very legitimate point. So, this week is value. So I'd like to ask Burned a simple question. What the heck is value? Please explain it to us, because I think it's a legitimate thing, but I think everyone should know about it.
Also, I have no idea what it is.
Right.
Okay. See if I can adequately explain this point without sounding like a complete idiot.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm going to insert myself into the podcast because Burned does it all the time, so ha! But the reason why I want to insert myself in here is because the upcoming explanation, where Burned just said he'll try to explain it as best as he can, doesn't go so well. He says some stuff and it makes sense to me, but I'm not sure it makes sense to everyone. So let me just put a disclaimer here saying what we're about to explain, like with a quick kind of explanation, might not get you the sense of value, but I guarantee you by the end of this episode, with all of the different examples that we give, you guys will understand what value is. So stick around, and if you're confused, just stick with it.
Anyway, a lot of people get value confused with lighting, and it's similar, but it is indeed different. Value is an important part of lighting, but anyway. So value is strictly I can't find the right word for that, but it's the amount of lights and darks in basically an art piece. So it's distribution from like full bright to full dark. So it's basically, to put it in a simple way, God, I'm having a tough time finding like a easily understandable definition of value. Let's see.
Well, it's a complex thing. You don't necessarily have to define it.
Yeah.
Well, no, because there's an easy way to put it, but I'm just having a hard time with the word. Because I often have a hard time just finding tangible thoughts, especially when I'm put on the spot.
You definitely had like a week to prep this. You have no sympathy.
Shut up. I didn't like write it down. Okay. No, so my first definition was correct. Basically, the definition of value is just the amounts of total lights and darks in your piece. So that's total light and total dark. So when we talk about value, we're talking about just the amount of, not the amount of saturation, but just the amount of extreme lights and the amount of extreme darks. You want to make sure that you have light, you want to make sure that you have dark, and every step in between. And that's what makes value important. Because a lot of times in art... Go ahead, what?
Sorry to cut you off. So is it kind of like the range of saturation values, basically?
Close. It's basically the range of light and darks. Oh, there we go. That was good.
Can we just, for those of you who are already lost, we're not even 10 minutes in, I think it would be good to draw a parallel with the we talked previously about RG, like different color schemes, RGB, CMYK, and HSL or HSB being hue, saturation, lightness. And HSL, a good way of thinking about value is, imagine taking a piece and taking away all the saturation. So basically you're grayscaling it. And we're going to talk about this a lot because we're going to be grayscaling a lot of pieces here in order to show value. But in order to correctly judge value is the difference between light and dark without any color. So if you were to take a picture and you were to take it into a program that has HSL adjust, like you can adjust the HSL, don't move the H, don't move the L. Just take the saturation, drag it down to the bottom, and that's how you can see the different values in a piece.
Because saturation is the amount of color. So that's why you can't really use it when you're talking about value. Yeah, so saturation is the amount of color or amount of hue in the value or in whatever piece. So like I said earlier, value is just the amounts of lights and darks. So anyway, the reason why I wanted to have this episode is because I just learned about value and I learned about how important it can or cannot be or so on and so forth. So I wanted to have an episode where we talk about some art pieces that have a really awesome range from darks to lights. And as you were saying, an awesome way to look at value in a piece is to put it into grayscale. Now, an interesting fact that you'll find as we go over each piece in this episode is that when we grayscale the piece, some colors will be complete opposites of each other and super pop out and be distinct from each other, but they could hold the same value. And you'll actually see that, a really awesome example, in our first piece.
Right.
So our first piece is called Winter Snowfall -MLP Secret Santa 2012, and it's by Chimichurri, who we've actually featured on the show before.
Yeah, I love this guy. I love his painting. It's always awesome. Always something cool, too.
Yeah.
Well, I approve, especially because I'm in Canada. So, I mean, I literally just had a big snowball fight yesterday. So this kind of relates. I think I was the Colt in the piece. I was getting snow in the face a lot, but it's still fun.
It's still fun. Yeah, at least you're gonna take some off. Anyway,
okay. So this is the first piece, and I think the fact that you brought up the whole value versus saturation thing, I'm just trying to keep it as the kind of like ground for the show. I'm trying to keep it in terms that I think people understand. I think HSL is a good way to kind of ground that for people.
Yeah.
So, we're gonna grayscale this piece right now. So you see it originally, and there's a couple things that pop out to you, and it has to do with color. And so the first thing that's gonna pop out to you is the red in the piece. And Bern, do you want to describe the difference in what pops out in the colored part of the piece versus what pops out in the grayscale?
Yeah. The things that stand out to me in this piece when you're talking about color, when you first look at it, is you can see, obviously the first thing that I see is that bright vivid of the OC's mane. Let's see, what's even art? It is Albino Sharky. It's his RC. OC. That's awesome. Anyway, and the really bright red, and then actually, if right to the kind of the right of him, like upper right, there's that like bright blue and like the top there, and it goes really well with the bright blue and that OC's eyes, which is, I'm not sure that OC. Anyway, her eyes, and I really like that OC, by the way, with like little spikes in her.
And there's also the table at the very front. So I think those are three main things.
And the cup, it has the magic there.
Right. Yep. But I think in terms of just like stare at the piece, the first thing I see is like that, like the two OCs are two different points, and then the table, I would think, would be the big one.
Yeah. Before we grayscale this, kind of the reason that really pops out is the center of this piece pops out. And if you notice, when you look at this, the center is really like bright and saturated, and it has those really bright colors, especially in his mane, and then the outsides are desaturated, which causes you to kind of look out the window. It's because the stuff outside of the window is brighter than what's on the inside, so it causes you to look out. And there's that awesomely done character in the foreground, but it's not what you notice because she's so desaturated. And that leads us to value.
Okay, cool. So we're going to grayscale this piece right now. And what's the first thing that they're going to notice, Bernd?
All right. You'll notice the first thing I noticed when I grayscaled this that I thought that was super awesome is when I grayscaled this, his red mane and her bright blue eyes, completely now irrelevant. They are the same exact value or amount of gray as a lot of other portions of this piece. So now when you're looking at this in grayscale, the brightest things that pop out are Albino Sharky's fur color, OC color, the teacup, the outside of the teacup and the snow, and then the table, and the highlight on the outside of the character. And it's basically what were whites in the original image. But the colors that stood out so much are now more or less irrelevant because they held the same value as other things. But you can still see in this piece that the stuff on the outside of the window holds basically a brighter shade of gray than the stuff on what's on the inside, what's in the foreground, and that character in the foreground there.
Yeah.
And also something else that you mentioned before we started recording is the red of what is that kind of
Hipster rarity.
French
The
or hipster rarity. I think it's
rarity.
another OC, judging by like the main. But her top hat, what is that called?
It's a beret.
Beret, thank you. Her
Yes.
beret and her sweater hold a similar value as well when they are in fact red and purple.
Look, I don't want to make fun of you, but that is like the farthest thing from a top hat.
The thing that goes on the top of
That's
the
fair
pony's
enough,
head,
fair
yeah.
enough.
It
It really was the
it's
farthest thing.
classy.
I wasn't
so-
thinking like classy
Right.
top hat Lincoln style.
Okay. What I want to bring about value fairly early on is when we talk about value, we're going to talk about value in like 3 or 4 different ways. And the first way that we did it is the interesting effect here, especially in the OC's hair, where it stands out, bam, pops out in that color. But as soon as you go to grayscale, like it just disappears. Like his hair literally blends into the background. And I want to bring up the fact that is not necessarily a bad thing that the value doesn't match up.
Yeah, exactly.
The use of color, even though the value is different, the difference in color is a very good technique to use. But what that shows you is there's the potential to make an art piece that is tons of different colors, but when you grayscale it, looks awful.
Yeah. There's
And so you need to be
Yes.
careful when choosing colors to also consider the value.
Yeah. So especially colors that are similar, colors that are super distinct and opposite, like that bright, vivid red, and then the violet behind him, like they super counteract each other and they create like and what is it? The color around the red is what makes it pop so much. So,
Yeah.
but even though they hold a similar value, so like colors can be an awesome way to separate basically objects in distinct things. But talking about just like the character, value can also be important when talking about uses of colors, especially colors that are inherently similar.
What I find really interesting is that even if you grayscale this piece, like it's still a really well done piece of art. Like you can make out distinct like all the different characters in the piece
Yes.
and stuff. And I think that really is a testament to how well they did value in this piece.
Yeah. Most often when critiquing value, if you grayscale a piece and then it's really hard to tell distinct objects or distinct characters, that is leading to the fact that the value of the piece or the amounts of lights and darks are too similar, causing it to blend together. Now, if you have an extreme amount of color, you can still have a really good art piece. Like this, I'm going to kind of mix up our transition thing because I initially planned it, but it's really relevant to everything we seem to be saying. And we wanted to do a quick mention of this, and we didn't really want to feature it, but this is an awesome art piece, and it's actually one of my favorites. So I'll link it in case you guys don't have it. And I'm going to take your job, Flutter Guy, but it's it's Celestia by Caramel Brulee. And I love this piece. I've had this piece my favorite for a long time. But I was looking at this piece in examples of values because the background is a great example of value where it starts that really bright yellow and bright white in the bottom right, and it goes up to like the dark purple in the bottom left as background. But when I ended up grayscaling this, just go to my grayscale. Yeah, pause. And so many links. I just clicked on Inkscape.
Just go
So
to your
bad.
minus thing.
Just
it's
go to the
there.
minus.
There we
It's
go.
a
I had to
minus.
get there. I was open in Photoshop and derp.
Derp,
Okay.
derp.
Anyway, when I opened this up or when I turned this into grayscale, I noticed that all of the colors hold a real similar value, and you can still tell the picture is somewhat distinct in grayscale, but there's a lot of colors in the colored version that are super distinct and separate from each other, but when you grayscale them, they all hold a really similar value. So this piece is a great example of how it uses color to separate objects in the character and colors in the character and lighting and shading. But as far as value goes, the colors hold a real similar tone, which is also believable for this piece because when a bright light source hits something, especially the sun, like the sunset in this piece, it kind of unifies everything. But
Okay,
I
damn,
really wanted
down
to
there,
bring in
cowboy.
this
I'd like to make a
example,
point.
Okay, no, go on.
So you kind of said it, but I was going to wait until later to bring up the Celestia piece. But yeah, the Celestia piece is a good example of something that just strictly from a value point of view, not from artistic point of view or not from I like this piece. Because like you said, the Celestia piece, great. And it's an example of how you don't need a tremendous variety of value in order to make a wonderful piece. But there's something about the Celestia piece, and I'd like everyone to kind of go and do this, but I'd like you to take a piece and I'd like you to turn it into grayscale. And I think what a good testament of value is the ability to turn a piece into grayscale and it doesn't look any worse. I think grayscale Celestia looks worse than the colored one. I look at the colored one and I go, wow, that's really good. And then I look at the grayscale one and I go, there's something missing there. You know, the other one, I'd like to go back to the other one.
Yeah, it's missing those bright, vivid colors that made it so awesome, you know?
But if you go back to the first piece that we were talking about, the winter piece, if you grayscale that, it doesn't lose anything in my opinion, because it still has that amazing variety of value.
What I find actually kind of interesting is that just by looking at this piece, and I mean, I don't really have too much of an understanding of value, but from my point of view, it would seem like this piece would have a large variety of value just because of that really intense bright spot in the lower right corner. But it's kind of interesting that they kind of simulated that, I guess, with the diversity of color. I don't know if I'm making that up.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And
Which piece? Sorry,
it's the Celestia piece. It's spectacular,
okay.
actually, because currently, like, just even if Flutter Guy has no knowledge of value and Bernd has all the knowledge, I'm like somewhere in between. But as someone who has got like a little grasp of it, it's still mind blowing to me that I can look at the grayscale piece of this, look at the bottom right hand corner, and it's like, oh, like I can see where the stroke ends. Whereas when you look at this, it's like, ooh, that's a bright light, you know?
Yeah. It's amazing how much color can do to a piece. So,
and we're not saying this is bad. In no way are we saying that. We're just saying that in terms of value, this is not the best example of different. And there are certain parts of the piece that are good uses of value, but overall,
I wanted to find an example of an art piece that was still an amazing art piece, but it just didn't have a large scale of value in it. And this piece was a good example because there's so many vivid colors, but a lot of them hold a similar value. And there's a lot of colors that are complete opposites, yet they look the same in grayscale. So, anyway.
And I guess like it also depends on if you're trying to draw a certain style. Like you may want to have a large diversity of saturation and use that value. But I guess like in a piece like this, or if you're going for a piece that's really somber and, you know, toned down, you probably don't want to use that diversity of value.
Right. And there is a couple points that we're about to bring up in a moment, where a large variety of value and a sharp change in value is not necessarily always a good thing. So let's move on to the next piece.
Well, but before we move on, important point that I'd like to make is kind of on that point, is there's a lot of ways that you can shift the mood in your piece. And some important ways you can do that are the amounts of value, whether you want a real bright scale of dark to light or whether you want it to be like majority darker. But your piece, like if it's majority dark, it's nice to have some kind of opposite. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But the important point I want to make there is if you're trying to aim for a mood to your piece, there's important ways you can change that. One of the ways you can do that is value, and another way you can do that is through color or certain kinds of color. And the other part that's tied closely to that, well, not really. That's talking about the mood of your piece. Another thing that I want to say before we move on is there's two important and what's the term I'm looking for? But two big ways, I'm forgetting the right word, but there's two ways you can separate like things or objects in your art piece. And one of those ways is value, where you have a huge shift from light to dark. So it separates something. And then the other way is in color. So there's a distinct color and they're complements or they're distinct from each other. So both of those are both important ways and interact in different ways when trying to separate something. So, and we'll get a bit more into how those work in some other examples.
All right. So moving on to our next piece, which is called Big Old Storm of Chaos by Animators, who used to be Spirito.
Right. We had her on the show with the Children of the Night interview, which is our most watched episode 3.
Yes. So this is an interesting piece in terms of value. because I personally think it's really interesting because of the lightning bolts. Because I feel like those, it's especially in the right hand side one, you have like this dark cloud and then the lightning bolt just coming right, cutting right through it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would actually, this is a good example in value where if you take a look at the colored piece, it cuts through, and I think it cuts through less when you take a look at the grayscale piece.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see the other darks in when you put the color on there, when you get all the pinks, it's almost like it lightens up the entire piece. Whereas when you've got like the contrast of the dark Discord and you compare it to the contrast between the lightning bolt, it's almost as if like colors made it. It's a weird thing. I agree with you because the lightning bolts are like little flashes of extreme value change.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something to be said about the fact that it's that gray cloud in the back is so much darker with color than it is without.
Yeah. I love the colored version of this, by the way. Like, we're swapping back and forth from grayscale to color. It's going to be a nightmare for editing.
Yeah,
too many times.
But, so I'll talk about the color a little bit. I love the color theme in this, because Spirito, or Animators now, she's a big fan of color theory, as she said in our interview, and she's a big fan of things like, what is the Disney movie? How can I blanking on such a simple name?
Cinderella.
Cinderella, thank you.
Yep.
She's a huge fan of how they use color in those movies and how they set tones and moods. So I think it's awesome, and I would assume it's a chaotic mood or an evil mood since everything is so pink and then like peachy in this, in the color. And I kind of hold the opposite opinion. I feel like the lightning bolts fit into the theme of everything when they're all pink and they're kind of like bright strikes of pink, even though they hold that bright value. But when we swap over to the grayscaled version, when I see something grayscale, I automatically now start looking for values, and I feel like that bright white kind of stands out. But it's still awesome how everything else can individually stand out from itself. And the darkest points in this piece are Discord and then the clouds there. But the, what is it? Floating,
Castle of some sort.
Canterlot. Not, it's...
Is it
Canterlot, right?
Yeah, it is.
I think so.
It's
Canterlot Castle.
Yeah.
Floating Canterlot Castle in the background. It's still a different enough value from everything around it. So in the colored portion, it kind of like some of the colors blend into the clouds and certain things, but you can tell that it's a distinct entity because its value is different from the things around it.
Well, I find it interesting that you brought up that point because in the colored piece, at least, like the lightning bolts are shaded pink. Mm-hmm. They have this distinct pink to them, and the mist around them is also pink. So it does kind of blend in with that piece in the colored version. But as soon as you go to like the grayscale version, you lose all of that information. So it's kind of interesting to see how much color influences your perception of value.
Okay, there's a point that I want to bring up because I noticed this and it's kind of obvious in this piece. But with the lightning bolts, she actually used a technique that I used on one of my recent pieces that I featured here, which was the ability to have something stand out, but also not have a radical, like cutting edge to it. And it's taking, so if you look at the lightning bolt, it's got that bright white down the center, but it's also got that glow coming off of it. Mm-hmm. And it's by duplicating that lightning bolt and then instead of just leaving it as is, blurring it outwards. And so it takes the shape of it, but so it has the combination of cutting through, but without that sharp edge. So it gives a little bit of blend with the background while keeping it bright. And I think that's really interesting because it's like, you know when you see like your own techniques being used in like much better artists' work, you're like, damn, I'm doing something right.
Yeah. Pat on my back, yeah.
I think the main part of this entire piece is Discord, and I think this is a great example to show how value really pops them out. And you can even tell the value. Sometimes value is a little bit difficult to tell from the color piece, because as different colors contrast, you lose that sense of value. But within this piece, maybe it's because it's all kind of one similar hue, but you can even tell in the colored piece like how much Discord stands out.
Yeah, this piece was an easy an easy piece for me to pick for this episode in terms of value, because since everything is inherently the same color and color scheme, you can tell the values in it really easily because there's no colors like trying to trick you. Like there's some colors that do some things that make other parts of it blend in, like the pink around the lightning or the pink on the edge of Canterlot there, and the colors on the edges of the clouds, but it's all majority pink. So if this had bad values and it was just a bunch of pinks, everything would blend into each other and there would be no imitation of atmospheric perspective, which is one of the most awesome portions of this piece, is how you can tell that the clouds recede into the distance and Canterlot castles recede into the distance, and it's because of the intelligent uses of value. And atmospheric perspective, which is a term we got from our episode with Spirito, actually.
Yep.
Yeah, and then as you were saying in the grayscaled piece, how much Discord actually stands out, and how he's like one of the darkest portions of the piece, with the exception of the clouds above him.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
I found your talk on value in last week's episode kind of interesting when you were bringing up who was it, Assassin Monkey's piece.
Yeah.
Because like even in this piece too, value just adds so much depth to the piece. Like
Yeah.
I don't think you notice value as much in basically the finer details, like the shifts in colors and stuff like that you can point out. But when you're looking at the piece overall, it has such a big influence on how you physically like perceive the perspective of that piece.
definitely.
At least that's what I think. I don't know if it's right, but
No, and also to recap on atmospheric perspective, like I just mentioned in one of our previous episodes when we were talking about, goodness, was it lighting? I don't remember. One of our previous old episodes in our first like 10, 11 episodes, atmospheric perspective is how things over great distances will become more desaturated or brighter, because the atmosphere and the air is physically getting in the way of that, and then you are seeing the color of that and what is in the air. So in landscape pieces, which we'll actually be getting to later on in this episode, things that recede into the distance are less saturated and brighter in value because basically the air or fog or clouds or whatever happens to be getting in the way. And that's part of nature, that's part of reality. That's a very realistic way of looking at things. So in this piece, it's done very well, as you can see, the clouds and then Canterlot being receded.
Speaking of getting on, we're now past 30 minutes, and we've only gone through 2 pieces. 3 pieces, technically, with the Celestia, but let's move on, because we still have questions, too, so we have like 15 minutes to get through 3 more pieces. So let's do
I
this.
think some of our future ones I can go pretty quick through, so.
All right.
well, all right. So our next piece is called Reflect by
Wrong.
Mewball.
No.
Okay, not
nature.
Reflect.
Sorry.
What's the one then, Bern? You misordered them.
Sorry.
Oh,
I didn't
God.
misorder them. They're right in the document.
What
What's
is
the
it?
next one?
Is it Aaron JVL piece?
Technically,
Or-
yeah, it's the Aaron JVL. You skipped
Okay.
over it at first, but it's
Okay.
fine. We can do it third.
Bam.
So introduce the nature one.
Do it.
Okay. So our next piece is called Nature by Aaron JVL. And this is a very interesting piece. Bern, you brought up this point before we started recording. Actually, no, I think it was Rainbow Plasma brought up this point because the lighting is all in the background.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah, I brought that up because a lot of the times we talk about having bright things at the front and then having the dark things in the background, having the character pop forward off of the background, especially if you don't... This is more of a scene. You know, it's got an environment as opposed to, say, just a piece with it can be an intricate background, but it's just kind of like, I don't really know where they are. It's just a complementary background, and and it takes that, so it has the pony at the front, and it has higher value, and then the background itself has lower value. What this piece does is it really creates a cool 3D environment by having low value at the front and high value at the back, kind of giving that opposite pop effect. And what I was trying to get when I was talking about it earlier, I was thinking about it, and what I'm trying to say is it doesn't require... Lights don't always... There's a lot of things that go into what makes things pop, and lights don't always make things pop out, because in this piece, because it's being surrounded by these darker values, it makes it pop back. Like it can't squeeze through,
Yeah,
so
it makes it
pops
recede.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an awesome feature in this piece. This piece is actually featured after, I believe, artist that Aaron JVL is a fan of named Blink or
Dude,
something.
Aaron JVL
Blink.
is just amazing.
Is it Blink?
Yeah, I think it's just
Something like
Blink.
that.
Oh, okay, it's just blink. Apparently, I can't read blink.
Yeah, BLINC.
I wanted to pronounce it like blink, but
Blink.
it's blink,
Anyways,
and apparently
not
I
a
don't
pony
know how to
artist,
read
so
blink.
Chillax.
Anyway,
Talk about Aaron JVL.
Regardless, Blink's an awesome artist. You can check it out, and this is a piece based on that with Fluttershy added, of course. And then, but no, as you were saying, the darks, especially that dark tree in the foreground, really like pops out and is distinct. And the things that I wanted to mention are wrapping it back into what I was saying before this is atmospheric perspective. Done awesomely well. You can see those trees in the far background have that sense of atmosphere over them and make them seem so far away. And then the color is awesome in this. And what I notice is that you have that really dark red and brown on towards the top and around it and in the trees. And then it slowly recedes into a yellow, a very pale, like saturated yellow in the background. And it makes an awesome shift of color in this piece. And something that was in the original that wasn't in this is there was like a dark purple violet in the top of the tree there to create that like this is what's closest. And it's not in this piece, but I think that's fine because there's a different sense of perspective in what's close in this piece compared to the other. But I just wanted to mention that shift of like red to yellow and how it has that scale. And then when we grayscale this, you can actually see that shift of red to yellow in this piece. So you can see that dark red in the top and how it shifts down value-wise into the lightness that is the background in Fluttershy.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Bernd, I have a question.
Yeah, go on.
Does how do I want to word this? For the most part, does like the most extreme value of saturation dictate what's closest or farthest away in a picture?
No, it can actually do both. So, see if I can answer that. When we're talking about atmospheric perspective, atmosphere usually gets in the way, causing things to become desaturated or brighter, making them seem receded. But bright things can still pop forward. It's kind of when you get into dark colors versus warm colors. Dark colors tend to recede and seem in the background, and warm colors tend to pop forward. So the reds in this piece, when we're talking about color, will pop forward at you, and then the cooler kind of yellow in the background will seem to recede. The reason for that is warm colors, like talking about physics, warm colors wavelengths are a lot more excited and a lot quicker, so they hit your eye faster, and then cool colors like a blue have a very long wavelength. That's why the ocean, when you're looking through it into the depths, will seem such like a deep blue, and that's why we think of oceans as receded and blue as far away. But when talking about value, it's strictly the shift of something. So like a very bright color can seem in the foreground and a very dark color can do the same thing. It just depends on the scene and it depends on the majority of what's in that scene. So I'm not sure if there's a rule to whether bright saturated values always pop forward or vice versa. But in this piece, it's the darks that seem closer. And in the, pretty much every piece we've done so far it's the light that's been receded and the darks that have been close. However, in a piece we're about to get to, it's the opposite.
Cool. Thanks.
Oh, come on. I was trying so hard. I was like, they can do it. They can transition.
No, he's let him finish. He said thanks and he was getting to it. So he's like, all right, thanks. Then,
okay. So our next piece is called Reflect.
Yes.
By Mewball. And Bernd, I know you love this piece, so
I love this piece too. It's great.
Yeah, it is fantastic.
I'll let you guys have at it.
Anything you want to say?
Okay, wait. Bernd. I think I want to let Flutter Guy get to this first because I feel like a lot of the times he gets left in the dust during this episode. So, like, what do you want to say first of all, and then we'll go over why it's good or go over whatever.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I find that this piece is very interesting because of the way in which it contrasts the value. Like, if you look at the grayscale version, which I have to pull up as well, it almost makes it a little bit more noticeable than the color version, where in the very center of the piece you have this really bright value, very high intensity value, and then in the top right corner and the bottom left corner it's a very dark value. And I thought that was a very interesting composition choice by the artist, and it makes the center pop out But actually, this is something I also brought up before we started recording, and I asked you, Bern, if like the way that value changes can influence like the perception of how do I want to word this?
Depth?
Perception of depth, but also like I made a really bad analogy before we recorded it, but it's like if you look at something that's bright, that's surrounded by a lot of things, like if you look at the sun, it basically hurts your eyes. But if you look at just a white background, for instance, on a computer monitor or on a wall or whatever, it may be really bright white, but it's not going to like hurt your eyes or stand out in any way. But then if you put some other colors or different values around it, it kind of will stand out more, pop out more, and it will kind of affect your the way that you perceive it.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome observation. And it's constantly used in art.
Can I bring up the little contrasting colors thing that we talked about before?
I was just going to mention that. So
okay. Well, when we were having our conversation, we talked for like 2 hours. Usually we like mess around before the podcast for like 30 minutes or so, and then we get going. We were like talking for like 2 hours before because we want to make sure this was prepped and educational, but also understandable for everybody. Yeah. And so when he brought that up, I brought up something which was something that I learned, which was I've been using the wrong term for complementary colors. Complementary colors are red and green. Red and green are complementary colors. Why? Don't ask me why the English language is the English language.
Color wheel.
The complementary colors, red and green, are opposite colors. If you don't know that, then okay, there's a long way to go. But I'm just going to assume that you know that red and green are opposite colors. So if you put red on a green background, that red is going to go whew, right out to you. Bam, that's going to pop. I use the word pop a lot, but it's the only word that works. If you put red on like an orange background, it's like, yeah, they're both kind of bright, but like the red doesn't really stand out that much. But when you get those complementary colors, it pops. And by that same meaning, you got blue and yellow, I think, or yellow and purple, and blue and something else. I don't know. Blue and orange. And by the same token, black and white are the same kind of things. They make each other pop. So when you have a sudden contrast between black and white, you get the same effect as if you were to put red on green.
Or orange on blue, or whatever kind of complement that you're using.
Or yellow and purple. There we go. We got all of them. Yay! And I know the colors.
Lots of colors contract with different colors. Complements are usually the biggest kind of things. They're usually what's normally used, but certain colors can counteract other colors. Like in our first example, that vivid red really popped from the vivid violet, and they're next to each other on the complement. They're analogous. Aha, I remember the word. Because all it is it's blue added into the red, and you have a violet, and there you go. But they held the same saturation, but they still really popped. So you can go one step over on the color wheel, or you can go the complete opposite on the color wheel, and it can create that pop. And then saturation, as you were saying, like white from black, that can create the pop as well. But no, as you were saying, how, like you look at something and it physically hurts because it's so bright that you look at it. And then you're talking about like digital art or artistic, traditional, whatever, when you have something so vivid, whether it's white, and then when you have another something that's opposite, it creates the illusion that that thing around it will like pop out. So if you have like a black circle on a white monitor, how much that black will pop out. So
it's like it's enhancing the
it's enhancing it, and it's also tricking us. So like when we look at a bright sun, it's way too bright and it's way too much light entering, and there's more to it, but our eyes and like what we can see is set to darker. It's like when you look at a bright light when you wake up. So like if you're sleeping and you turn on the lamp and it hurts your eyes, it's because everything has been that was around you was dark, and then you see something bright. So you can use that concept in art with how something is dark and you can make it pop with light. I mean, it's pretty simple. We've been saying a lot, but that's putting it in way more majestic terms than you could imagine.
We've been saying it like 4 or 5 times now. If you don't get it, then we're gonna have to go into like another hour. I think this is a good way to just Bern, do you want to go over the over the last thing, the chart really quickly? Chart. Because we need to get the questions like really quickly. So I'm at this point, like these pieces, this piece of Pinkie Pie is just, it's amazing, and these are great examples that if you need to go look at value, go download them and get a program to just take out all the saturation and do that with your own art as well, because I think it's very beneficial for people to take into consideration value more. It's not 100% necessary for everything. We've seen great pieces that only use colors differences to make them pop, and it just gives a different style. But I think these truly advanced artistic pieces are aware of and acknowledge value.
It's just important to acknowledge it. It's another concept and piece of making good art that's important to know, or just, be aware of and take into consideration. Anyway, actually finally wrapping back into this piece, and one of the most fantastic pieces that we can feature on the show, by Mewball. And I'm a huge fan of her, by the way. She's easily like my favorite digital painter that I have on, that I watch on DeviantArt, and I love her work because she always brings in so many awesome colors to separate things rather than value. But even in value, this piece is awesome. So as I was saying earlier, how you were talking about whether light or dark can show foreground, background, receding. And this one, I find the things that are bright are what seem closer, are what seem more in the foreground, which is interesting because technically how this image we're looking at is posed. I forget the term for what a reflection is, Mercadian something, whatever that physical term is for how reflections work. But the lake is technically like right in our face, and then that black background is far away. But since it's a reflection and she wants it to be basically an illusion of another realm, because if you watch the episode, you know that this pool was like a portal into creating versions of whatever, whatnot. But what's bright in this piece seems to be closer, which is interesting. So how bright Pinkie Pie's reflection seems closer to the camera, but the things that are dark, like the background, seem to be more receded and in the background. I said the word twice. I repeat myself a lot. But no, so this piece is awesome in the use of color and in the use of value. So we're looking at this in color right now, and we have the blue background, pink Pinkie Pie, with violets separating her colors from the background. And if we shift this into grayscale, what you'll notice is that the brightest portion of this piece is Pinkie Pie's reflection. It's the stuff that's in the water, and it's the flowers and grass that are going around the pool. And then the darkest portion of this piece, you'll notice, is the top right, which is like what is real life, what is the background of the cave. And then it's less dark in the bottom left because that's where the water is, that's where the reflection is. And so obviously, clearly, when you see this in grayscale, it looks like an awesome piece in grayscale. It looks like it was made for black and white, which is awesome. But when we swap this back to color, you'll notice that it's black in the top right, and then it's actually violet in the bottom left. She didn't add black in there. She actually added a completely different color to create that separation of one side of her canvas to the next, which is awesome, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
Nice.
So we need to be done with this for now. There's only so much we can talk about value.
Yeah.
It's a topic that if you're going to be an artist in, it's a good practice.
Yeah,
it's a cool new trick that you guys have learned to take your pieces, turn them into grayscale, and see if it all blends together.
One last thing. Just another stupid trivia tidbit. White is the presence of all colors, and black is the absence of colors. People are like, white's the absence of color. No, it's the presence of all of them. So black will create a void in artwork, hence why it looks like there's nothing in this piece in the top right, and like it's the darkness of the cave. And then white is like the presence of all colors. It's what's bright. It's what makes your eyes hurt when you look at the sun, things like that, which is what Pinkie Pie is obviously like pointed out. But it's useful to note in this because in the bottom left, how that purple is there, it makes it seem not like a void. It makes it seem like it has presence, where it's contrary in the top right, where it's like nothingness. That's what black creates in art. Anyway.
All right.
Go on with the dirt.
Pinkie Dash is not here this week, which means I'm running the questions. So I have two questions here, one of which is fairly simple, and the second which we can talk a little bit about color theory, just very, very, very quickly, because we've only got about
in the future, I want to have an episode about color theory, and we'll do more educational stuff, but the future.
We can do a quick little thing right now. But the first question is sent in by Zari, who sent in a lot of questions. Thank you. And the question is, which pony do you find most enjoyable to vector? Which is obviously relevant because, in case people have forgotten, we are all vector artists.
Yes.
So I'm going to start off not by saying which one I like to vector the most, but I'd like to say my least favorite pony is Rarity because she has gradients in her mane and don't even get me started.
Yep. Gradients in awkward places, man.
I don't have a favorite. I just have a least favorite of the main 6. So.
See, I'm gonna actually go completely opposite of you and say that Rarity is my most enjoyable to vector because I really enjoy the perspective in her mane.
I really like her mane.
No, I really like her mane. No, but in all honesty, like I do enjoy how her mane is put together, and it's kind of neat when you kind of move stuff around and shift stuff, like how you can actually see it in almost 3D, like a pseudo 3D kind of thing.
Right, as opposed to something like a Rainbow Dash hair, which only is shown from one side.
Yeah.
Well,
Orange?
It's an awkward question for me because since I've been doing so many other stuffs in college, I don't have a lot of time to vector. But I found when vectoring, I actually enjoy vectoring other people, like other people's OCs and like making presents for people. So some of my favorite vectors I've actually done is like birthday gifts and stuff like that. And for some birthday gifts, I've vectored myself, and I don't want to be so narcissistic. Like, I love vectoring myself. I do, but I don't say it out loud. No, anyway.
Well, yours is an interesting design, right?
Yeah.
So I, of course, I like vectoring OC, something unique. Because, like, I would be like, oh, I like vectoring my favorite pony. But it's like, I like making new things for people's OCs. So, like, a friend of mine, Arrow, he had this OC, and, like, he made it in Pony... What is it? The Pony Creator, and it was awful.
Mm-hmm.
But I vectored it in a unique pose, which he had never gotten as a gift before. So it was awesome to do that for him, to put his OC in a unique form and recreate it in a vector, and that was a lot of fun. And like when I made your gift and stuff, like that was a lot of fun. Or when vectoring, I'm doing a vector of Moonstruck, and that's a lot of fun. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, moving on. The next question, which I'm not going to allow Byrne to talk a lot about because I'd like to see if
I have an interesting fact to
it.
say, but I won't rant about it.
Okay. So, the color comes in from Anonymous because I don't think he left a name, did he?
No, he did not.
He left his real name, and we don't know if he wants that to be used. Make sure if you send an email that you include a name that we can use. So, the question is, what colors do you guys really like to see together? And for some reason, I keep reading this question as, what do you guys really like to see together? And I was like, what does that mean? Movies? No, what colors? I always miss the word color. What colors do you guys really like to see together? And so I'm going to start off by just saying, we just talked about the complementary colors. Red on green, green on red. You know, opposites, for some reason, are called complementary. I'm sure there's a reason behind it. It's beyond me. But there's also another term, and Byrne, what is the term? Starts with an A?
Analogous.
So analogous colors are colors that are very close. The red and green are opposite. Right, they're opposite on the color wheel, whereas, say, blue and green are very close to each other.
Yes.
Right,
yes.
And therefore they're analogous. And so if you're going... I like to see a lot of these pieces in which it uses a same or very similar color throughout. So when we were looking at the Aryan JVL piece, it was using a lot of warm colors and a lot of analogous colors.
Colors that are similar create harmony more than
and I like that harmony.
compliments do.
Yes, and similar thing, kind of the same, not really, but different shades of the same color are also, they're not called analogous colors, but they're analogous to me. Like, for example, I always bring up that Colgate piece that was done by, I don't remember the artist, which makes me an awful person, but it's that one Colgate piece where it's, all just the one shade, background, pony, everything, and it's all just separated by very slight things in violet, or shades like lighter and darker blues. Anyways, what colors do you guys really like to see together? I like to see analogous colors. Damn, you just learned a new term.
Yeah, go ahead, Flutter Guy.
Very nice. Kind of on a similar note, because they are pretty much analogous colors, is I enjoy seeing warm colors. And for those who don't know, there are warm and cool colors. And warm colors include stuff like reds and oranges and yellows and
green can be sometimes a warm color.
Brown.
And then cool colors are the exact opposite of that. So like violets and blues and even green sometimes can be cool colors. But I really enjoy warm colors. So like any fall scenes, for instance, where the leaves are red or orange or stuff like that, I really like those pieces because of that.
warm colors most of the time will carry kind of like a happier feel, and then cooler colors will create more of a receded and melancholy feel.
Like a quieter feel almost.
Yeah.
For me personally, I guess I'll disagree in that I like to see complements. I like to see colors used together where I can see them be like, I know where those are on the color wheel, and I know that those are complements. Like, when I see a piece that's majority red, blue, and yellow, I'm like, yeah, those are primary colors. I know stuff. And I think it's awesome to feel all nine might be like, oh, art. So I like seeing that. On our piece we just featured, Pinkie Pie, what's unique about that is the colors, they're almost complements, but they're not quite analogous. Because, what is it? Red and blue are primary colors. So the pink and then that kind of cool turquoise blue has some green in it. It has some yellow in it, making it a little bit more turquoise. There's some green on the side close to Pinkie Pie. So it's neat to see that contrast of colors, and they're kind of an almost complement. So in the piece I did by Blitz Pony, the blue and orange, it wasn't straight up the opposite blue and orange. It was kind of closer to an analogous on the color wheel, blue and orange, which made it really cool and made it pop. So I really like when there's two colors like on the opposite of each other. But
well, the thing
anyway.
is, you have to realize is that the color wheel is a circle for a reason. And on the color wheel, there's 6 basic colors. There's the primary colors and there's the secondary colors. And so if you start at one point and you move in either direction, you can only do 3 things. You can move 1 space, you can move 2 spaces, or you can move 3. 1 space on either side is the analogous colors. 3 spaces is the complete opposite, so that's the complementary colors. But there's also that third option of the colors that's 2 spaces away. So what you were talking about, Burned, there, to go from blue to red is 2 steps away. And so it's an interesting middle ground, because you got the 2 steps. You go from blue to violet or purple to red. So it's just, there's no best way to do something, but it's always good to just have this knowledge, because one time it'll just come up and you'll go, oh yeah, no,
what gets complicated is you can mix value into the color wheel, because once you start mixing like values into colors, it can change how a color feels. So what I love in art especially is when an artist can fool a color or fool what used to like could be a rule and make it the opposite. So there's a lot of art pieces that make warm colors recede and cool colors seem in the foreground, and I think that's an awesome feature. And naturally cool colors can feel like warm colors. Like phthalo blue, you probably don't know what that is, but I used it in painting class. It's a real bright vivid blue close to what the water looks like in the Pinkie Pie piece. And that's like, it's like a warmer blue. It's like one of the only blues that can feel warm. And technically it was phthalo blue and phthalo green kind of mixed together, but whatever, close enough. So I love when artists can make a color like swap over a rule or like break the rules of what normally would happen and make a cool color seem warm, vice versa. So there's a lot of times, especially in the Aaron JVL, like that was yellow, but it was slightly green, so it seemed cooler. But anyway, the cool fact I do want to enter, ending kind of wrapping this up, is if you're interested in how colors interact and cool colors and do different things and warm colors, whatever, what you should Google is something called Homage to the Squares. And what that is basically artists and this artistic movement. I don't know a lot about it, I apologize, but we covered it a little bit in my painting class. It's basically just artists putting colors next to each other in paintings in just squares, like 3 or 4 squares, and that's it. I don't remember if I mentioned it in a previous episode, but if I did, and you didn't check it out, you should check it out now, because it's awesome. Because they use value, they use saturation, and they use brightness of colors and warmth of colors to mess with stuff. And the amount of color can also change a feel of a color. So if you have a really bright, vivid orange, and you put like a small square of blue in the center of it, that orange is going to overpower the blue and make the blue feel warmer or lighter. But if you have a large blue square with a tiny square of orange in it, the blue square will make that orange seem cooler. So the amounts of colors will change how other colors feel. And in all these homages to the squares, artists just go crazy with mixing really bright, vivid colors together and how they interact. And it's a cool thing to look at if you're interested in color wheel and so on and so forth.
Hello, audience. Cool. Thank you for watching. I just wanted to have a heart-to-heart chat. Does anybody else's brain hurt? Because my brain kind of hurts.
In the future,
I'm not trying to say that as an insulting thing. I just think there's like a combination of learning and applying my knowledge that just like.
So we're gonna end on a entertaining note. Ponies.
Speaking of ponies,
Okay.
I can't even. Words hard.
We gotta get to the plugs. We're over an hour.
Yeah.
We need to get to the plugs.
Speaking
plugs.
of plugs, frickin', I want the name of it exactly. Inahoshi the Dark Pen. I
Yes.
love you. That is amazing. That was it. I had to give her a shout out.
Cool.
That's fantastic. You're awesome.
Cool.
I have no words.
All right. Well, I'm gonna do the plugs.
She made me fan
for it.
art.
We
Go
cool?
look at it.
We cool? All right. All right. So, can finally get to it. I haven't done this in like a month, so this will be interesting. We have a DeviantArt page. That's where you can head to check out the favorites folders. That's where you can see every single piece of art featured on the show today, along with a couple of other, probably not a couple of others this episode. Actually, no, that's not true, because we have one piece in there that you will definitely want to check out. So check out our favorites folders. You can also watch us on there. We give out updates for when we're going live and different things like that. It's just probably the best place to get us. But you can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter is at Cutie Art Crusade, and Facebook is facebook.com/Cutie Art Crusaders. Follow us there, and we'll update you when we're going live or when a new episode is out. And yeah, we also have an email, so you can send us an email to cutieartcrusaders@gmail.com. That's where you can send in art recommendations, questions, and or other random stuff. And yeah.
One last final thing. We didn't have time to cover it in this episode, but you really should go check it out if you're an aspiring artist and you want to learn more awesome stuff about value and atmospheric perspective. A piece we didn't get to cover is called a critique for Nelvarkre or something by Cosmic Unicorn. And it is an awesome critique. It is very similar to the critique that she offered to me, and you can also check that out in our favorites folder. But she basically takes a piece by a brony, by a fan, and goes super in-depth with it, grayscales it, talks about value, talks about atmospheric perspective, talks about what's important, what's less important, and all in detail, and it's awesome. And it was eye-opening for me when looking at value, especially in my own critique. And not to like plug myself, but you should check out the critique for me, because that's really what made me understand value, is seeing critique of my own work. Like, that was just like, oh, when you apply, like a critique applied to my own work, and value applied to it, it's like, oh, but anyway. Also, another exciting thing, also to do with Cosmic Unicorn, she will be joining us next week. So, for our next episode, we will be having Cosmic Unicorn on the show, and we'll hopefully be talking a little bit more about value, a little more atmospheric perspective, and her awesome artwork, and so on and so forth.
That will be amazing.
I have this weird thing where I always think that our show is really boring, and I think it's because I just time it really badly. Because I'm sitting here very relaxed and like almost falling asleep, and that sounds really bad. And I think of that as really bad because I'm like, oh man, we're gonna be putting people to sleep. But I think it's just because, I don't know, we just have such soothing voices.
Yeah.
And we're so
Just listening to my
so-
rants is just so soothing.
just so soothing. And it's something where you go into this relaxed, like absorbing knowledge Zen phase.
So
and it's just wonderful.
Bernd is hypnotizing you with his knowledge,
Ooh.
his crazy knowledge of the arts.
So,
That's
by the
romantic.
way, one more thing, and I swear we're going to end after this. I don't care what you have to say, Bernd. We're all going to end this after this. But we are finalizing the details of how you guys can get involved more. Not this week, but I think next week we're going to tell you guys how you guys can send us in things for future episodes. And we'll be able to feature your art, and also you'll be able to help us out when we request different things. Anyways, we'll have the finalized details hopefully next week, and then, yeah, you guys can get to participating. This all comes down to you guys, because to be honest, if we put out something like, hey, we need you to do this, and then we get like 2 responses, it's going to be like, oh, never mind. But you guys showed us with this fan art episode that just happened that you guys are dedicated. If you got a challenge, you're up to it. So next week, look out for that.
I've had like 5 people, maybe 10 people come up to me and ask if we're going to do another fan art episode because they want to get fan art on the show.
Right. We're probably not going to do another fan art episode for a
No.
while, but we're
For a
looking into
while,
ways.
we are going to do one. Thank
We
you very
will do
much.
one
I will make
at
sure
some
we
point.
do one.
but not.
I'm gonna be the
not in
one
near
pushing for
future.
another fan art episode.
I'm the one who pushed for it in the first place, and now I'm the one being like, chill.
But we do have some other awesome ideas for you guys. So yeah,
Get your.
Well, so we'll
get
do
your
an
artistic
awesome
side
idea
out.
first that's different from fan art about us, and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
if people keep making it, we'll have to make another fan art episode about us because it's so awesome. And you guys, you guys,
We
are
will
awesome.
keep you updated and look out for that next week. So if you're looking for some motivation for some pictures to make, there you go. All right. Well, this has been Cutie Art Crusaders episode 29. Next week is 30.
wow.
Wow. So, other than that, my name is Rainbow Plasma.
I'm Burn to One.
And I'm Flutter Guy 317.
We hope you learned some stuff on this educational episode, and we'll see you next week.
We love you.
Bye.